The morning sky hung gray and heavy over the city, like a blanket that had forgotten how to let the sun through. Marcus held his daughter's hand as they walked down the cracked sidewalk, her small fingers wrapped tightly around his thumb. At 3 feet 9 inches tall, Marcus saw the world from a different angle than most people. But he had learned long ago that perspective wasn't about height. It was about heart. "Daddy, are we going to the big house today?" Sophie asked, her 7-year-old voice bright with curiosity despite the early hour. "We are, sweet pea," Marcus replied, adjusting the backpack on his shoulders. Inside were his cleaning supplies, his lunch, and a worn paperback he'd been reading during breaks, a story about a man who saved a kingdom not with a sword, but with kindness. Sophie skipped ahead a few steps, her braids bouncing against her yellow raincoat. She was everything to him. His reason for waking up, his reason for working 3 jobs, his reason for believing that tomorrow could be better than today. Her mother had left when Sophie was just 2 months old, unable to handle the reality of raising a child with a man the world so often dismissed. Marcus never spoke ill of her. He simply loved harder, worked longer, and made sure Sophie knew she was the most precious thing in his universe. They arrived at the bus stop just as the number 47 pulled up, its brakes hissing like a tired animal. Marcus helped Sophie climb the steps, then pulled himself up, ignoring the familiar ache in his knees. The driver, an older black woman named Gloria, who had been driving this route for 15 years, smiled warmly at them. "Morning, Marcus. Morning, baby girl." "Morning, Miss Gloria," Sophie chirped, already making her way to their usual seat. Marcus nodded gratefully and followed his daughter to the back of the bus. Through the window, the city rolled by. Convenience stores with barred windows, laundromats where people started their days before dawn, churches with signs that promised hope in weathered letters. This was his neighborhood, his world, and he loved it even as he dreamed of giving Sophie something more. The bus climbed the hill toward the west side of town, where the houses grew larger and the lawns greener, where the streets had actual trees lining them instead of just telephone poles and graffiti. This was where Marcus worked, cleaning the homes of people who had more money than he would see in 10 lifetimes. He didn't resent them for it. He simply did his job with dignity, knowing that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of. They got off at Riverside Drive, and Marcus walked Sophie to his sister's house, a small, tidy bungalow where Rosa watched Sophie during the day while Marcus worked. Rosa opened the door before they even knocked, her face warm with the same kindness that ran in their family. "Come here, mi amor," Rosa said, scooping Sophie into a hug. She looked at Marcus over Sophie's shoulder, her eyes holding a question she didn't need to ask. "Are you okay?" Marcus smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I'm good, Rosa. Thank you for this." "She's family, Marcus. You don't thank family." Rosa squeezed his shoulder, her hand gentle but firm. "You work too hard, hermano. Don't forget to eat lunch." "I won't," Marcus promised, though they both knew he often forgot. He kissed Sophie's forehead, breathed in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, and headed back down the street toward the address that had been texted to him late last night. A new client, a big job, the Ashford estate. Everyone in the city knew the name Ashford. William Ashford had built his fortune in tech and real estate, his face occasionally appearing in the business section of the newspaper, but the family itself remained largely mysterious, private, hidden behind gates and carefully crafted public images. Marcus didn't care about any of that. A job was a job, and the agency had told him this one paid well, better than well. He needed it. Sophie's school was asking for fees he didn't have, and winter was coming, which meant higher heating bills and the need for a new coat she'd already outgrown. The Ashford estate sat at the end of a long, tree-lined drive, its iron gates opening automatically as Marcus approached on foot. The house itself was stunning, a sprawling mansion of gray stone and tall windows, with ivy climbing its walls like nature itself was trying to reclaim something that had been taken. The grounds stretched out in every direction, manicured gardens and stone pathways, a fountain in the center of the circular driveway where water danced in the morning light. Marcus walked up to the front door, his reflection staring back at him from the polished surface. He straightened his shirt, cleared his throat, and pressed the doorbell. The chime that echoed inside sounded like church bells, deep and resonant. The door opened, and a woman in her 50s stood there, dressed in a crisp black dress with her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was pleasant but professional, the face of someone who had answered this door 1,000 times. "You must be Marcus," she said, her voice even. "I'm Mrs. Chen, the house manager. Please come in." Marcus stepped into the foyer and his breath caught in his throat. The ceiling soared 3 stories above him, a chandelier hanging like a constellation of crystals catching the light. The floor was white marble, so clean he could see his reflection. A grand staircase curved upward to the 2nd floor, its banister gleaming dark wood that looked like it cost more than his entire year's salary. "Mr. Ashford is away on business," Mrs. Chen explained as she led him through the house. "He's asked that you do a deep clean of the entire estate. It hasn't been properly cleaned in some time, and there's a gala being held here in 2 weeks. I'll show you where the supplies are kept, and you can begin wherever you'd like." She walked briskly, her shoes clicking against the floors, and Marcus followed, taking in room after room of stunning architecture and expensive furniture. There was a library with shelves that reached the ceiling, filled with leather-bound books, a dining room with a table that could seat 20, a living room with windows that overlooked the gardens, where the morning light poured in like liquid gold. "This is the West Wing," Mrs. Chen said, gesturing down a long hallway. "Mr. Ashford prefers you don't spend much time here. It's not in use." Something in her voice made Marcus look at her more carefully. There was a tightness around her eyes, a careful neutrality that suggested there was more to the story. But he simply nodded. He wasn't here to ask questions. Mrs. Chen showed him the supply closet, stocked with more cleaning products than he'd ever seen in one place, and then excused herself. "I'll be in my office if you need anything. Take your lunch in the kitchen. There's food in the refrigerator. Help yourself." And then she was gone, her footsteps fading down another hallway, and Marcus was alone in the vast, silent house. He started in the library because it felt like the kind of place that deserved care. He dusted each shelf, ran his cloth along the spines of books whose titles he could barely pronounce. He cleaned the windows until they were invisible, until the garden outside looked close enough to touch. He worked steadily, methodically, the way he did everything, with attention, with respect, with the quiet pride of someone who believed that all work mattered. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, then began its descent. Marcus's stomach reminded him he hadn't eaten, but he wanted to finish the ground floor before taking a break. He moved through the dining room, the living room, a music room with a grand piano that he dusted so carefully it felt like touching something holy. It was when he reached the base of the grand staircase that he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the hum of his own thoughts. A voice. Singing. Marcus stopped, his hand frozen on the banister. The voice was young, female, achingly beautiful despite being barely more than a whisper. It drifted down from somewhere above, a melody that sounded both sad and hopeful, like a bird singing in a cage. He looked around. Mrs. Chen was nowhere to be seen. The house was silent except for that voice. Slowly, Marcus climbed the stairs, following the sound. He reached the 2nd floor where more hallways branched off in different directions, but the singing was clearer now. It was coming from the West Wing, the place Mrs. Chen had told him not to go. Marcus hesitated. He wasn't a rule breaker by nature, but something in that voice called to him, something that reminded him of Sophie when she was sad, when she needed him and didn't know how to ask. He walked down the West Wing hallway, his footsteps silent on the carpet. The singing grew louder, and now he could make out words, a lullaby, sung in a voice that cracked with disuse and loneliness. The hallway ended at a single door, painted white and unremarkable except for the fact that it was closed while all the others stood open. The singing was coming from inside. Marcus knocked gently. "Hello?" The singing stopped immediately, replaced by silence so complete it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. "Hello?" Marcus said again, softer this time. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Marcus. I'm just cleaning the house." Nothing. He tried the doorknob. It turned. The room beyond was large but dim, heavy curtains drawn across the windows, blocking out most of the afternoon light. As his eyes adjusted, Marcus saw a bed, a desk, shelves lined with books and old toys, and in the corner, partially hidden behind a chair, was a girl. She looked to be about 12 or 13, with long dark hair that fell around her face in tangles, and eyes so wide and startled they looked like a deer caught in headlights. She was thin, too thin, wearing an oversized sweater and clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. "Please don't tell," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please don't tell him you saw me." Marcus's heart broke and mended and broke again in the space of a single breath. He knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening, his eyes level with hers. "Tell who, sweetheart?" "My father." The word came out bitter, sharp, nothing like the way Sophie said, "Daddy." He doesn't like people knowing I'm here." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. "Why not?" The girl looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. "Because I'm not perfect. Because I'm broken." "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently. "Emma." She said it quietly, like she wasn't sure she still had permission to claim it. "Emma," Marcus repeated, letting the name sit between them. "I have a daughter about half your age. Her name is Sophie. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that you are not broken. Do you hear me? You are not broken." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and one spilled over, tracing a path down her cheek. "Then why won't he look at me? Why does he keep me up here like I'm something to be ashamed of?" Marcus wanted to find William Ashford in that moment and shake him until he understood what he was doing, until he saw what Marcus saw, a child who needed love, who needed to be seen, who was disappearing into silence and shadows. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "But I know it's wrong, and I know you deserve better." They sat there together as the afternoon faded into evening, and Emma told him her story in fragments, in pieces she'd been carrying alone for so long she'd almost forgotten how to share them. Her mother had died when Emma was 5. Car accident. Sudden. Devastating. William Ashford had shut down after that, his grief turning into something cold and distant. But it wasn't just grief. It was something else, something Emma didn't understand until she was older. She had a condition, she explained. A genetic disorder that affected her mobility, that made her joints weak and her bones fragile. She used a wheelchair sometimes, crutches others, and on bad days, she couldn't get out of bed at all. Her mother had loved her fiercely, had fought the world to make sure Emma knew she was worthy, was wonderful, was enough. But when her mother died, her father looked at Emma and saw only the reminder of what he'd lost and the burden of what remained. He couldn't handle it, couldn't handle her. So he hired nurses, tutors, kept her in this wing of the house, away from the parties and the business associates and the life he lived downstairs. He provided everything she needed physically, but nothing she needed emotionally. "He hasn't spoken to me in 6 months, Emma whispered. "Not since I asked if I could come to dinner when his friends were here. He said no. He said I would make people uncomfortable." Marcus felt rage and sorrow warring in his chest. Emma, listen to me. Your father is wrong. Do you understand? He is wrong. Then why does it feel like I'm the problem? Because hurt people, Marcus said quietly. And sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who fail us the hardest. But that doesn't mean you're not worthy of love. It means they're not worthy of you. Emma looked at him with something like hope flickering in her eyes, fragile as a candle flame. Do you really have a daughter? I do. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her pictures. Sophie at the park, Sophie blowing out birthday candles, Sophie asleep with a book on her chest. She's my whole world. She's lucky, Emma said softly. No, Marcus replied. I'm the lucky one. He stayed with Emma until the light was completely gone, until Mrs. Chen's voice echoed through the house, calling that it was time for him to leave. Before he went, he squeezed Emma's hand gently. I'll come back tomorrow, he promised. And I'll bring my daughter if you'd like to meet her. Would that be okay? Emma nodded, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, she smiled. It was a small smile, tentative, but it was there. Marcus left the Ashford estate that night with his mind racing. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen, couldn't unknow what he knew. This wasn't just about cleaning a house anymore. This was about a child who was being slowly erased, who was learning to believe she didn't matter. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus returned every day. He brought Sophie with him, and watching the two girls together was like watching spring arrive after a long winter. Sophie was pure sunshine, chattering endlessly about school and friends and the stray cat that lived behind Rosa's house. Emma soaked it up like someone who had been dying of thirst, her laughter rusty at first but growing stronger, more genuine, more alive. Marcus cleaned the house, but he also cleaned the corners of Emma's world. He opened the curtains in her room, letting light flood in. He brought her books from the library downstairs, ones she'd never been allowed to read. He made her favorite foods in the enormous kitchen and carried them upstairs on trays decorated with flowers from the garden. He treated her like she mattered, because she did. Mrs. Chen noticed, of course. She found Marcus in the hallway one afternoon, her face carefully neutral. Mr. Ashford won't like this, she said quietly. Then Mr. Ashford and I will have a conversation, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the fear curling in his stomach. Mrs. Chen studied him for a long moment, and then something shifted in her expression. Her mother used to sing to her. That lullaby you probably heard. It was her mother's. She's a good kid, Marcus said. She deserves better than this. Yes, Mrs. Chen agreed, so softly he almost missed it. She does. The gala was set for Saturday night. Marcus had finished the cleaning days ago, but he kept coming back, kept spending time with Emma, who was transforming before his eyes. She smiled more. She talked more. She started using her wheelchair to move around her room instead of staying curled in the corner. Sophie brought her drawings, and Emma hung them on her walls like they were priceless art. On Friday afternoon, Emma asked Marcus a question that made his heart ache. Do you think my father could ever love me again? Marcus sat down on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. I think your father is lost, Emma. I think he's been lost for a long time. And I think he's made terrible choices because he's too scared to face his own pain. But I also think that love, real love, never completely dies. It just gets buried sometimes under fear and grief and pride. So there's hope? There's always hope, Marcus said. But Emma, you need to understand something important. Your worth isn't determined by whether your father wakes up and sees you. Your worth exists independent of anyone else's ability to recognize it. You matter because you're you, not because of what you can or can't do, not because of what anyone thinks, just because you exist. Emma started to cry, and Marcus held her the way he held Sophie when the world felt too big and too scary, and he let her cry until she was empty, until the tears stopped and something like peace settled over her face. Saturday arrived, and with it, chaos. Caterers flooded the house, setting up tables and bars. A string quartet practiced in the music room. Flower arrangements appeared in every room, their fragrance filling the air. And William Ashford returned. Marcus was in the kitchen when he first saw him. A tall man in his early 50s, distinguished-looking with silver threading through his dark hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's car. He moved through his house like a general surveying his troops, checking details, issuing orders, his face a mask of careful control. Mrs. Chen introduced them briefly. William Ashford shook Marcus's hand with the kind of grip that said he was important, and Marcus was not, his eyes barely registering Marcus's presence before moving on to the next thing demanding his attention. Marcus wanted to grab him by his expensive lapels and shake him. He wanted to drag him upstairs and make him look at his daughter, really look at her, and see what he was throwing away. But he swallowed the anger and simply said, "Your home is beautiful, sir." "Thank you," William replied absently, already turning away. The gala began at 7. Marcus was supposed to leave before then, but Sophie was upstairs with Emma, the two of them looking out the window at the guests arriving in their fancy cars, their fancy clothes, their fancy lives. Marcus couldn't bring himself to take Sophie away yet, not when Emma was smiling, not when she looked more alive than she had in the 2 weeks he'd known her. He stayed in Emma's room with the girls as the party swelled below them, the sound of music and laughter drifting up through the floorboards. Emma's face grew progressively sadder as the night wore on, the reality settling over her that she was being deliberately excluded from her own father's life. "I wish I could go," she whispered, looking at Sophie's yellow dress. Nothing fancy, just a sundress, but Sophie wore it with such confidence it might as well have been a ball gown. "I wish I could be normal for just one night." "You are normal," Sophie said with the simple certainty of a 7-year-old. "You're Emma. That's all you need to be." Marcus made a decision that was either brave or foolish, and probably both. "Then let's go." Emma's eyes went wide. "What?" "You heard me. Let's go downstairs. Let's show your father that you're not something to be hidden. Let's show him. Let's show everyone that you belong." "But my chair. Bring it," Marcus said firmly. "It's part of you, Emma, and all of you is welcome." It took 20 minutes to get Emma ready, to find a dress in her closet that still fit, to brush her hair until it shone, to convince her that she was beautiful, that she was brave, that she was enough. Sophie held her hand the entire time, and Marcus felt his heart swell with pride for both of them. They took the elevator, a small service elevator Marcus hadn't even known existed, down to the first floor. The party was in full swing, the house filled with people in tuxedos and glittering dresses, champagne flutes catching the light, conversation humming like electricity in the air. Marcus pushed Emma's wheelchair into the foyer, Sophie walking beside them, and for a moment, nothing happened. The party continued, oblivious to their presence. And then someone noticed, then another. The conversations began to fade, heads turning, eyes finding the girl in the wheelchair with the man who cleaned their houses and the child in the yellow sundress. William Ashford was standing near the grand staircase, mid-conversation with a group of investors. He looked up at the sudden silence, his eyes tracking the direction of everyone's gaze. He saw Emma. For just a moment, every emotion he'd been burying for 7 years crossed his face. Shock, pain, shame, something that might have been recognition. Then his professional mask slammed back into place, and his jaw tightened. He crossed the foyer in quick strides, his face a storm. "What is the meaning of this?" Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between William and Emma. "Your daughter wanted to attend the party in her own home. She's not William stopped himself, his eyes darting to the watching crowd. "This is not appropriate." "What's not appropriate?" Marcus said, his voice low but carrying in the silence, "is keeping your child locked away like she's something to be ashamed of." A ripple went through the crowd. Someone gasped. William's face went red, then white. "You have no right—" "I have every right," Marcus interrupted, and his voice was still calm, still steady, but there was steel in it now. "I have the right that comes from seeing what you refuse to see. I have the right that comes from spending 2 weeks with your daughter and realizing that she's one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And I have the right that comes from being a father, a real father, who would walk through fire for his child instead of hiding her away in the darkness." The silence was absolute now. Every eye in the room was fixed on them, the party forgotten, the pretense stripped away. William looked at Marcus, and something cracked in his expression. His eyes moved past Marcus to Emma, who sat in her wheelchair with her head held high, tears streaming down her face, but refusing to look away. "Emma," William said, and his voice broke on her name. "Hi, Daddy," Emma whispered. William Ashford, billionaire, businessman, man of steel and success, fell to his knees in front of his daughter's wheelchair. His expensive suit touched the marble floor, and his hands trembled as they reached for hers. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Oh God, Emma, I'm so sorry." The dam broke. 7 years of grief, of denial, of trying to outrun pain by burying it came flooding out. William Ashford wept in front of his daughter, in front of his guests, in front of the world, and he didn't care anymore about appearances or control or keeping up walls. "I missed your mother so much," he sobbed. "And every time I looked at you, I saw her, and it hurt so much I couldn't breathe. And I was so afraid that I would lose you too, that your condition would take you from me, and I couldn't survive that. So I pushed you away. I thought if I didn't love you, it wouldn't hurt when—" He couldn't finish. Emma reached out with shaking hands and touched her father's face. "I'm still here, Daddy. I'm still here." They held each other then, father and daughter, broken and healing simultaneously, and Marcus felt Sophie slip her hand into his. He looked down at his daughter, his reason for everything, and she smiled up at him with tears in her eyes. "You did good, Daddy," she whispered. The party never really resumed. Guests filtered out quietly, respectfully, understanding they had witnessed something too private, too sacred to gawk at. Mrs. Chen appeared with tissues and quiet efficiency, ushering people toward the door with gentle firmness. Marcus tried to leave too, to give the Ashfords privacy, but William stopped him. "Wait, please." William stood, his face raw and red but more human than Marcus had ever seen it. "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Marcus said. "Just be her father. That's all she needs." William looked at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time, and saw him. Saw his strength, his dignity, his heart. "You're a better man than I've been." "I'm just a man who loves his daughter," Marcus replied. "Same as you could be." William nodded, something like understanding passing between them. "What do you do, Marcus? Besides cleaning houses?" Marcus hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I do whatever I need to do to take care of Sophie. I work 3 jobs. I'm trying to save for her education, trying to give her opportunities I never had." "What if you only needed 1 job?" William asked quietly. What if I hired you to work here, not as a cleaner, as someone who could help Emma, be here for her, teach me how to be the father she deserves?" Marcus looked at Emma, who was watching him with hope blazing in her eyes. He looked at Sophie, who was already nodding enthusiastically. He looked at William Ashford and saw not a billionaire, but a broken man asking for help. "I'd want to bring Sophie sometimes," Marcus said. Emma needs friends her own age. Done, William said immediately. And I'd want to be clear that my job is to help Emma thrive, not to help you feel less guilty. Understood, William said, and he meant it. And one more thing, Marcus added. Emma needs to be part of your life, not hidden away, not protected from the world. She needs to be seen. William looked at his daughter, and this time, he didn't look away. She will be. I swear to you, she will be. Over the following months, the Ashford estate transformed. Emma's room was moved downstairs to a beautiful suite with windows overlooking the garden. William started having breakfast with her every morning, then dinner every evening. He went to her doctor's appointments, learned about her condition, stopped seeing it as something to fear, and started seeing it as simply part of who she was. Marcus came 3 days a week, bringing Sophie, and the four of them became an unlikely family. They had movie nights and game nights. They celebrated birthdays and holidays. William taught Sophie about business and astronomy, his two passions. Emma taught everyone about resilience and hope. William also quietly paid for Sophie's education, all of it, from grade school through college, and when Marcus tried to refuse, William simply said, "You gave me back my daughter. Let me give you this." The city newspaper ran a story a year later about William Ashford's public advocacy for disability rights, about his foundation supporting children with genetic conditions, about his daughter Emma, who appeared beside him at events and fundraisers with her head held high. The article included a photo of William and Emma together, both of them smiling, and if you looked closely, you could see Marcus in the background, just out of focus, his hand on Sophie's shoulder. He didn't need to be in the spotlight. He never had. All he'd ever wanted was to love his daughter and make the world a little bit better, one kind act at a time. And in the end, that was enough. That was everything. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Share what moved you most in this journey. Was it Marcus's unwavering love, Emma's courage, or the moment a father finally saw his daughter again? Your words mean the world to us. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue bringing stories like this to you. Stories about real love, real transformation, and the truth that sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest heart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling with us. Until next time, may you see the light in others, and may they see the light in you.